if you were to already installed.
Linksys brought back out the old blue box with DWRT pre-installed, and it failed miserably because they didn't do it right. But so, you have a lot of options on a PC-based firewall. A Linux person, IPCOP/IPFire. I say that because they're basically the same thing. For a while I was using IPCOP, well, development of that kind of stopped, so I moved to IPFire. Now IPCOP has started back up, IPFire is okay. Smoothwall is another option, and if you're a glutton for punishment, Redwall is a Gen 2 based one that supposedly works off CD. I never got it to work. I never got it to work on an installation either, and I'm a Gen 2 user. If you're a BSD preference, pfSense is the one I'd recommend. That's actually what I'm going to demo later because that's what I'm running right now. It has a plethora of features. Now, if you're really, really glutton for punishment, you can build all of this yourself. The app that I use to interface with IP tables is Firewall Builder. That lets you build advanced firewalls. You can actually manage an entire network of IP table firewalls with Firewall Builder. You would have to install some of the other apps we talk about manually. Sometimes RPM, Debian, sometimes you have to compile it from scratch, depending on how you like to do things. So, some of the basic features that you're going to want to look for in one of these firewall distros. Obviously, you want a firewall and routing. Well, that one was a given, but you always have to start with the easiest thing, right? DHCP and DNS. I want to hand out IP addresses to the network, and I want to resolve DNS. Some people do it on a different box, but that's not always necessary. Most of these will have that feature built in. Great for your mom's house, your grandma's house, your sister's house, maybe even your brother, if he's a moron. Another one that I like is his proxy features. I'm to the point now where I have kids. One, he's going to want to surf the internet someday. He's going to want to go to places that I don't approve of. So, I need some sort of way to prevent him from going to the places. Note to self, change timeout on the laptop before next presentation. 5 minutes is just a little bit too aggressive. Anyway, so there's a lot of places that you don't want certain people to go, or you want to block ads. That's a great way to reduce your malware. Outlook, still not a way. So, Squidward blocking, you can block malicious sites right from go. IDS, IPS, Snort, Row are the two major providers. I am a Snort guy, SourceFire guy. They're now Cisco. They promise it won't be bad, but Cisco doesn't have a good track record in that respect. VPNs. I'm actually, surprisingly enough, VPN'd into my house right now over the wireless. We'll get into what we're going to do with that a little bit later. And the last, and for me the most important thing of all, is the ability to view the logs, either locally and send them remote. I like the ability to send them remote. Are you raising your hand, ma'am?
No.
You got your hand up, so I thought I'd ask. Any questions so far?
The Snort is a sniffer?
Snort is not only a sniffer, it's it does some packet analysis and it can do blocks based on specific rules. It's an IDS, intrusion detection system, and it can be set up to also block things. I don't have mine at home set in block mode, but I have a couple of clients that I do have some blocks set up on. Wait, I want some support for this. Well, in some cases you're going to use it for clients, small business clients. Most of the Linux distros, no support. Forums, I'm not saying it can't fix your problem, but you're going to need to use your friend Google. pfSense is actually based in a commercial application. You can call pfSense and for a nominal fee, they will walk you through your problem. I have a buddy who has had to do pfSense commercial support. They're good. He said they could do some things that he thought were impossible, and they were very willing to work with him to get it done. So, what kind of hardware do you need? Well, you probably got an old computer lying around. I know I do. Most of the firewall features I've described run on a 1 gigahertz processor. As a matter of fact, in years past, when I ran wireless for Penguicon, I did it on a 1 gigahertz machine with 2 gigs of RAM. You need a couple of 100 megabit network cards. Probably never going to need more than that for the moment, unless you have Verizon Fios, which I envy you. There are also some mini board options. PFSense has a certified provider. You can get a little mini board, looks like a 5-port switch that has all of the components. PFSense pre-installed is about $210, roughly, depending. And you can also get hardware crypto modules installed on it, so you can do higher throughput VPNs and stuff. It's not a bad little box for that price. And it works great for clients. It's low energy, easy to manage. Just stick it in like a switch. So, well, I don't have an extra box, but I've got this router. DDWT and Tomato are both excellent options for you, depending on what kind of router you have. DDWT has a lot more hardware options than Tomato did. When I looked at it, full disclosure, I haven't really played with any of them because I went right to actual firewalls. I had too many boxes in my house. Anyway, with those options, you don't usually get to IDS IPS. If you've never used Snort, then you're probably not going to miss the features. It's very hard to tune, it's very loud. I'll take, for example, I had 1,700 Snort alerts yesterday in my Snort IDS infrastructure, just at my house. We'll get into the logging here in a little bit. Yes, sir?
Question about horsepower. If you're using a WRG54G, and it's a single person thing, you're going to be able to VPN in fine.
Yeah. I mean, 1 or 2 VPNs is great. If you're going to try and VPN to 20 of your friends, you need a different solution.
Yeah, okay.
So, a lot of it depends on usage. But the IDS, IPS, I know the Snort doesn't work very well. That just takes a little bit too much horsepower for theirs. They're 128 megahertz sometimes, depending on which model of router that you have. I mean, they route packets great. They don't do much more than that.
They're slow machines.
So, well, what about other options? This is my most favorite. Running the firewall in VMware or VirtualBox. That's actually how I have my network set up. I run it on my big VMware box that I ordered, along with some VPNing or VLAN magic that I do on my switch. So I have an external DMZ, a DMZ and an internal. The PFSense, depending on which interface I have it VPN to, or VLAN to, will route the traffic. So I have a guest wireless network, I've got my internal network, and it's all virtual. To do that, you need a switch that's VLAN aware or multiple switches. VLAN aware switches actually are as expensive as they sound nowadays. I bought, when I ordered my new VMware server, I did a hardware thing earlier in the year. They threw in a Cisco switch pretty cheap. So I bought a 48-port gigabit Cisco switch. Before that, I had a Dell 24-port switch. It was like 250 bucks, all gigabit, supported VLANs, had a crappy web interface, but it did the job. Wasn't my favorite switch of all time, but it was a good. I had it for 5 or 6 years, and it's still sitting in my basement, not plugged in. But it wasn't a bad switch. In addition, PFSense will let you multi-VLAN off the same NIC. So if you only have one NIC in one of those little, you can get one of those, say, Intel, little bitty Intel new micro PCs that they're starting to build. It only has one NIC in it. Well, it supports VLANing, so you can VLAN off of that with the VLAN switch and do it all off one interface. As I said, I'm running mine in VMware. I previously ran IP cop in VMware and IP fire in VMware in the same sort of configuration. Never had a problem.
Why use virtual anything?
Well, if hypothetically, if I were to have 10 VMs that I want to play with, that's 10 boxes if I do it without VMware, or 1 box if I do it in VMware. So I choose to buy one big beefy box that can do 20 or 30 VMs instead of having a bunch of computers turned on around my house. That's sort of why I do it. So at my house, I've got a DHCP DNS CentOS box. I've got a CentOS box that I use for kind of jumping around in my network. I've got a Spacewalker management system. I've got the firewall. And then I've got a web server that's just a web server, and then I do have a physical storage box that kind of helps out with all of that. On top of that, I also run a Windows domain controller for development purposes and hacking purposes. I also have a couple of VMs that I sometimes turn on, like a Windows 7 VM, a Windows XP VM, coming soon, an external honeypot running Windows XP.
Can I add to the VM.
Sure.
Good reasons for a VM. Easy way to back up and take snapshots of your VM as well. So if you screw something up, you just have to copy a previous, or roll back to a previous snapshot.
Yeah, that's also a very good point. So if you're fooling around and yeah,
Can you repeat what?
what he said was you can also take snapshots. They're very easy to back up. So if I'm going to go to a website that I know,
Of,
the machine, you can take a physical snapshot of the machine at a certain state. So yeah, regardless of what it's doing, it's running. I'm going to go to a website that I know will affect it. I can snapshot it. I can go to that website, it gets infected, it blows up. Oh no, the world's coming to an end. I revert to that snapshot, boom, it was right where I started before I took the snapshot. So it's an easy way, if you know you're going to potentially do something that may break something, to roll that change back without having to go through the pain of a reinstallation. That's another great, a lot of security professionals and developers are now using VMware for that very reason. If they blow a machine up, it's a 30-second restore. Instead of reinstall from scratch, 30, half hour, however long it sometimes takes. Windows updates takes an hour in a Windows 7 box nowadays. So that's another good reason. And there are a couple of free options for getting into VMware if you're kind of just curious about it. VirtualBox is the one that I have, that I use on a lot of my Linux side. VMware for ESXi for servers. So if I have an actual server, I'll put VMware ESXi on it. It's free. It will do, depending on the hardware, quite a number of VMs on it. It has all of those snapshotting and other features in it. And it's really easy to install. It takes me about 10 minutes, and I can actually kickstart it off of PXE. So I can boot it over the network installed ESXi. Other questions, comments? Yes?
With the virtualization, you can get in an interesting chicken and egg situation if you have your firewall in a VM, and the VM is using storage on an external storage server. Because then, if you forget about, well, you can't use DHCP for your storage server or something like that, you get into weird situations where
Yes.
where like Zen or ESX won't let you bring up any VMs because the storage repository is not available, even if it's not on that storage repository.
And that is a catch that you need to be aware of when you design it. Typically, I statically assign my VMware server, my firewall, and my DNS DHCP server. Now, most of those are
different
virtual.
VMs.
They're all different VMs. So, when you think of it as VM is it's an actual computer, just inside another computer's container. So there's a computer that runs multiple canisters of different VMs. So we'll take, for example, a server that I run at my house. It's an old HP DL360, 72 gigs of RAM, 12 processors with hyper-threading. So I've got 24 virtual processors. On it, I have some SSDs in a RAID array to do storage, and then I also have, off of my storage server, on a map to storage server. So I have roughly 2.5 terabytes of storage to play with in this VMware environment. What I do is when I boot the VMware server, it comes up, and then I tell it specifically when it reboots to bring up the firewall immediately, bring up the DNS DHCP server immediately. All of my other VMs will come up in whatever order they feel like coming up in, and they'll pull from those servers. But you have to tell it, hey, I want this server to come up first, that next server to come up. The only downside is that's all your eggs in one basket. So if my VMware server goes blah, my network isn't working, my wife calls me saying she can't get to her Netflix, and, well, it goes downhill from there. Yes, sir?
What's your electric bill?
I'll actually get to that, because I think I have that on the last slide. But I'll tell you, it's not cheap. So, do you have to use a different distro? No, you can do this by hand. You can do it in CentOS, you can do it in Ubuntu, you can do it in Gentoo. I'm a Gentoo guy, so I'm going to dig on Gentoo a little bit. Be aware that you're going to have to do a ton of manual configuration. I can get an ICFire or pfSense box up in about 15 minutes and be going. If I were to do it by hand, it'd probably take me 8 or 10 hours just to configure everything. And since I've never done it that way before, the first time around it will take a lot longer. I have to figure out how to install the IPsec VPN. I have to figure out how to install and configure OpenVPN. Where a lot of this has already been done for you. You stick in the DVD or boot it from virtual media, and boom, it's up and running. So, having said that, you guys probably want to see one of these, right?
Yeah.
This is where the VPNing comes into play. Because I just happen to have my pfSense set up. So when you log into pfSense, let me wow, they changed this the other day, didn't they?
Yep.
I didn't even notice they updated it. Anyway, so here's the front page I get when I log in. I'm running the latest version. It gives me a status dashboard. You can actually add additional dashboards if you like. You see, ironically enough, I'm VPN'd in from this IP right here. So that's my connection back into my home network from wherever we are. I have some site-to-site OpenVPN. I also have a site-to-site IPsec open. I can pull down traffic graphs to show what my utilization is. It's going to probably be pretty much nothing right now. And it'll give you the usual disk usage, swap usage, all of that stuff. Now remember, this one is actually in a VM. So I gave it 2 cores and 6 gigs of RAM. That's how much RAM, that's how much I had to give it. You can do it on a lot less than that, if you want to. This thing spits along pretty quickly. So, I want to install, in pfSense, not a lot of stuff is installed by default. They're all available in packages. And installing a package is as simple as finding what you want and clicking install. So I actually have the OpenVPN client export utility, which will pre-create OpenVPN connections for you. Basically, you want somebody to have access to your network and they're not all that good with computers. You can hand them one installation package that will set up OpenVPN in their computer, configure it, and let it come back in.
Also counts as certificates already.
Yes, it does.
Great.
PF Blocker, which is an additional, what this will do is pull down lists of blocked IPs, SANS, Top 20, other major IP offenders, and put them on an automatic block list. So I update that once a day. I don't really want to talk to the Russian Business Network. No good ever comes from the Russian Business Network. And then I have Snort installed. As I said, I'm a long-time Snort guy. You can go in and configure Snort by command line if you want, but they do actually have a fairly decent Snort configuration option. So here's my Snort. I only have it enabled on the outside. You can barnyard it to an SQL server to start playing with it in base and SnortB and some of the others. Even get into what security I need, which is probably its own talk. But I can select which rules I want to enable and or disable, what categories these rules are in. I have their community rule set and then emerging threats mostly turned on. I do turn some stuff off. I game. I don't want it to tell me I'm gaming. I BitTorrent, so I don't want it to tell me I'm BitTorrenting. Policy, a lot of policy is like, hey, you're at Facebook. Thanks, I hadn't noticed. So there are a lot of rules, and then within those categories are different rules that you can enable and disable. And you can do all of this from the command line in the configuration files. This makes it a little bit easier if you haven't ever done that before. So there's a ton of rules, 30 or 40,000 of them right now, I think, that you can enable and disable as needed. You will need to set some variables within Snort. If you've never used Snort before, a lot of these it will do by default for you. I don't even think I had to modify any of these. Yeah, it was kind of redone. Barnyard, you know, that's really, Snort could be its own talk. I could give a whole talk on Snort and just how to configure that east. So,
You may schedule that next year.
that's what I get for opening my mouth, I guess. Anyway, you can also configure it when it updates the rules. I think I have mine set to once a day. Once or twice a day is usually enough. But it's very flexible. You can write your own rules if you want to. That's also not a thing we're going to get into. Another thing I would like to touch on is the OpenVPN. That allows you to VPN in. You can configure it so if you're somewhere where you really don't want anyone to sniff your traffic, you can force everything to go through your house VPN. So I'll set up a VPN if I'm somewhere like, say, Starbucks, and I don't want anyone to sniff my traffic. You can set it up so it will encrypt all of the traffic, shove it to your server, do the request from your house, and come back. That's one of the nice features of it. Of course, the ability to get into your network and do things like show your pfSense firewall is also very useful. Anybody else want to see in pfSense? Well, we've got it kind of open here.
Do you have any of the captive portals set up?
I do not have the captive
That's
portal
really
set
neat.
up yet.
I've deployed this on my clients with the captive portal. It's just really nice. And we have it in the school system, so it makes everyone log in each time.
Yeah,
It tracks the users.
And you can do that. And I've been kind of fiddling with it a little bit for my guest network. I have the third network set up on here, and I've got steps as I get time, sort of thing.
It works really well. Really simple too.
Coming soon to a con near you.
So this is what you would see if you bought that $200 and something.
No, not necessarily. You can install pfSense. Where did you go, pfSense? On a physical computer. Say you've got an old computer lying around with a couple network cards. pfSense is a 200 meg ISO. It's free. You can go ahead and install it. What they charge for is the support. So you have an issue that you can't figure out through their forums or Google. You can call the support and they'll work it through. So, any other questions on pfSense while we've got it open? I'm not done yet. I've got more stuff. I'm not over yet. I promise I won't go over. Where were we? All right, so I set all this stuff up, right? Well, great, it's working. But what about seeing all of the data that it's actually now collecting for you? Your firewall logs, if you set up Snort, you set up Snort. Well, you can send those logs to a syslog server. Or, if you're a little more ambitious, you can send them to a Splunk server. Guess what I've got to show you? Yes, a Splunk server. The important thing to remember is when you start seeing these events, it's going to look like you're under attack. You're going, I get 10,000 alerts a day. Well, no, you're probably not under attack. You have to tune it. Snort especially is notorious for needing to be tuned. Usually when I do a Snort installation, I say it takes 6 months to fully tune it. And that's me going in every day. I'll go in, look at all the alerts, junk, block. Next day comes up, well, it keeps getting smaller and smaller until you get 1 or 2 events that you can deal with. But that is a process that takes a significant amount of time. Now, the Snort SourceFire people can do it a whole lot faster. Me spending 10 minutes a day and then I'll wait another day. It can be done a little bit quicker than that, but there is a lot of tuning involved. So the first time you start it up and you get 10,000 Snort alerts, no, you're probably not under attack. The internet is a very noisy place. I'm telling you, it's a noisy place.
Yeah.
So, and guess what I have to show you? Yes, I have a Splunk server. So I pre-did a little search here. This is all of the stuff I've blocked so far today. So I have done 2,100 blocks so far today in my Snort server, in my firewall. Yeah, and that's really in the realm of blocking. That's not that bad. It will tell me what IP address it was blocked from, what rule it was blocked on. Here's one that was dropped because of the D-Shield block, which is SAN's top group. So on and so forth. I can pull the Snort logs up if I want to. which will be a little more interesting. The thing to know about Splunk is it's more powerful than just doing your firewall logs. It can pretty much, it's kind of like grep with a web front end and lots of pretty graphs for your bosses. At my international bank, we're actually going through a Splunk deployment right now. We spend a little bit of money in hardware, maybe a little bit too much. When you're using full UCS blades that we typically use for VMware for each of our Splunk indexers, 40 processors apiece. Yeah, it crunches a little bit more data than I want to admit to. But it has different applets that you can do or build. It's XML based, so we'll take, for example, my Splunk app for Unix. I install a little forwarder in my VMware or physical boxes, and it will collect my little hosts. My little hosts. VPN can sometimes be a little slow. It will collect usage stats as well as their logs. So I can set up searches to see who logged in and promoted themselves to root. I can do searches to see what process was running. Right here I have up CPU, memory, RAM for the 4 boxes that currently are powered on. I had at one point had my PF6 boxes in there too, but that broke and I haven't fixed it yet. So it does Windows, it does Unix. I mean, I'm actually collecting all of my Windows server logs in here too, because I can't. Questions on that? I'm actually ahead of schedule. Uh-oh. Yes, sir?
You know offhand what kind of attacks you have to protect against or look for OpenVPN besides making sure you're safe from Heartbleed?
Well, I was going to say Heartbleed is the first one that comes to mind because that does use that specific OpenSSL library. So if you were running OpenSSL at the time, that's the one. OpenVPN hasn't been known for a large number of vulnerabilities. I've been using it for years. I keep track of it. I've never really, none are coming to mind. There's probably a couple minor ones, but there's no earth-shattering, gee, we can go right around and decrypt all of your traffic type ones. Of course, certain people and individuals and institutions claim they can do that. Anyway, that's a discussion for another day as well. So, any other questions on that?
I would kind of comment though that with VFSense, because of the Heartbleed bug, they were really on top of it, and upgrading was completely painless. You clicked it, you waited, you rebooted, it was done. It was, their updates are really, really smooth on the VFSense box.
Yes, they are. And some of the others are the same way. It's fairly easy. You can actually, I believe you can set PFSense to auto update if you so desire. I, as a habit, don't normally implement that option.
You want to know when you're playing.
Yes. Yes. You want to know when things like that happen? At least I do.
Do you have any of the traffic plugins in there for the graph? I can't remember the name of the plugin. I run it on mine. It's a few of them.
Etherate?
RRD graphs.
Not the RRD graphs. It will actually plot out your whole network and draw graphs and everything. Show all the devices, all the connections. It'll do flows, so you can see how much from each IP address is going to where. Breaks it all down and graphs it up. It's
The plugin I believe is called Etherate. Or that's the Linux, there's a Linux version of it. It also supports Cisco NetFlow. I don't have it installed on mine,
yeah.
but it's based on the Cisco NetFlow
Yeah.
and will support that sort of thing. Here's a list of all the apps within PF6 that are available. Asterisk is one that comes to mind. You can actually block by country, which I have done on client installations. I have found that my dentist has no reason to talk to China. No good ever comes from him talking to China. Yes. He really doesn't have a business use to talk to people in China. Or the Russian business network, which is one of my favorite people to block.
So many different plugins for it. It's really.
Oh yeah, and all of
You
these.
can do a whole talk just on PFSense. It's just a great product.
Asterisk for phones is one that's right up there at the top. I haven't fiddled with that one yet. It's on my list. The ones I would like to get are the Apache with mod security. And then also an Apache reverse proxy, so you can configure it that if you have internal websites, you can set this in front of it and it will run it through my proxy, make sure there's no bad and silliness before forwarding the request onto your internal server. So if you have a single IP, you can run multiple web servers within that and let PF sets kind of round robin the whole thing around to your various websites. You need different hosts.